For years, the truth stayed hidden, the victims forgotten, the cases left cold, until science revealed what time could not. This is Decades in the Dark, where cold cases are brought back to light. California in the 1970s was the picture of suburban safety. Tree-lined streets, kids on bicycles, families leaving their doors unlocked at night. But in the quiet hours, something sinister moved in the dark. A predator who studied his victims, who broke into their homes while they slept, who brought terror to the heart of the Golden State. He would be called many names: the East Area Attacker, the original Night Stalker, and finally, the Golden State Killer. It began in Sacramento County in the summer of 1976. A masked man slipped through windows and sliding glass doors. At first, he targeted women living alone, but quickly his methods escalated. Couples became his prey. He would tie the man, then drag the woman into another room and sexually assault her for hours. During these years, he didn't kill, but the terror he left behind was devastating. More than 50 assaults across Northern California, hundreds of burglaries, entire neighborhoods held hostage by fear. Victims remembered his voice, cold, controlled, sometimes whispering to himself as if trapped in his own madness. They remembered his breathing, heavy, almost animal, and they remembered the mask, a ski mask, a hood, fabric that hid everything but his eyes. Police released composite sketches, built from what little survivors saw. A young white man, athletic, light-colored hair. Some drawings made him round-faced, others sharper, but none ever matched perfectly. How could they? No one truly saw his face. One of the most chilling attacks came in February 1977. A young couple was asleep in their Rancho Cordova home when the attacker broke in. He bound the husband, then whispered to the wife as he moved her into another room. "If you scream, I'll kill him." At times, he told women he would come back to murder them if they went to the police. He threatened to kill their children if they didn't comply. The cruelty didn't stop at threats. He rummaged through their belongings, sometimes scattering photographs of family members, as if to remind his victims that no one was safe. He stole personal items, trinkets, jewelry, underwear, not for value, but as trophies. And after the assaults, he often lingered. He raided refrigerators, ate food, even took naps in the house while his victims lay bound and terrified. In this particular case, after hours of torment, he placed dishes on the husband's back and warned that if he heard them clatter, he would kill them both. Then he disappeared into the night. He seemed to know how far to push, how long to stay, how to leave without being seen. Later, the reason would become clear. He had once been a police officer. He understood patrol patterns, investigative routines, even how victims would be questioned, and he used that knowledge to vanish into the dark. From 1976 to 1979, the East Area Attacker was everywhere and nowhere at once. And while he hadn't yet taken a life, the violence was escalating. His victims and investigators knew it was only a matter of time. By the end of the decade, the attacks grew darker. In 1979, the East Area Attacker vanished from Sacramento. But not because he was caught. He had moved south. In Santa Barbara, Ventura, Orange County, a new shadow emerged. A killer. Couples murdered in their beds. Women attacked alone. Families left shattered by the violence inside their homes. At first, investigators didn't realize these were connected. Different regions, different names. But the details were hauntingly familiar. Bindings, break-ins, control. And always the same chilling sense that it was the work of a single man. The same criminal who had once terrorized Northern California. In December 1980, Dr. Robert Offerman and his girlfriend, psychologist Deborah Manning, were found murdered in Offerman's condo. They had been bound, but Offerman broke free and tried to fight back. The dogs in the home barked wildly as chaos erupted. The attacker opened fire, shooting Offerman multiple times before killing Deborah. There was no evidence of sexual assault. This crime was different. Investigators believe he had intended another assault but lost control when Offerman resisted. This became the turning point. From this night forward, murder became a part of his pattern. Just 3 months later, his violence escalated again in Ventura. On March 13, 1980, Lyman Smith, a 43-year-old attorney being considered for a judgeship, and his wife Charlene, 33, were murdered in their home. Lyman's 2 children from a previous marriage were not in the house. They were staying with their mother that night, spared by chance. Sometime after midnight, the killer broke in. He brought ligatures, shoelaces, strips of material, to bind his victims. He forced the couple into submission. Charlene was sexually assaulted. The attacker often whispered threats during assaults, telling women things like, "If you scream, I'll come back for your family." While no transcript of his exact words that night survives, investigators believe his pattern held true. Control through terror, humiliation through threats. Then came the killing. Instead of fleeing after the assault, he grabbed a log from the couple's own fireplace. He bludgeoned Lyman and Charlene with such force that the crime scene was described as one of the most vicious Ventura police had ever encountered. Neighbors later told police they had heard unusual noises, faint thuds, perhaps muffled cries, but nothing that made them realize the horror happening next door. The killer slipped away into the night, leaving behind only devastation. The use of the fireplace log horrified investigators. It wasn't just violence, it was a weapon chosen from inside the victim's home, a symbol of comfort twisted into an instrument of terror. It sent the chilling message that anything in your house could be turned against you. For the Smiths' families, it was unimaginable loss. For detectives, it was confirmation. The man once known as the East Area Attacker was no longer just a prowler or sexual predator. He had become a killer who blended sadism with murder, escalating with each strike. By 1986, at least 13 people were dead. Years later, when investigators tried to separate his crimes from those of Richard Ramirez, who had become infamous as the Night Stalker, they began calling this unknown man the original Night Stalker, a name to remind the world that his terror had begun first. But at the time, he was careful, smart. He left behind little evidence. No fingerprints, no face. Only the memory of his voice, and the terror it carried. And then, nothing. The attacks stopped. For more than 30 years, his identity remained a mystery. Generations of detectives tried and failed to catch him. Victims' families were left without answers. But why did he stop? Some criminologists believe he grew afraid of capture. By the mid-1980s, DNA technology was beginning to emerge. Even though it wasn't widely used in police work yet, the attacker had once been a police officer himself. He knew evidence could outlast him. He may have realized that every assault, every murder, left behind a trail that someday could be traced. Others think his personal life forced the crimes to slow. In 1973, he had married Sharon Huddle, an attorney. They had 3 daughters together. By the time his murder spree ended in 1986, he was deep into family life, living as a husband, raising young children, playing the role of a normal suburban father. That image may have protected him, making him seem the least likely suspect in any investigation. There were also changes in his professional life. After working as a police officer in Exeter and Auburn, he was fired in 1979. Not for brutality or corruption, but for something petty. He was caught shoplifting a hammer and dog repellent from a store. An odd crime, but one investigators later suspected wasn't random at all. Tools of his trade. Tools for breaking into homes, for silencing dogs. After losing his badge, he worked as a truck mechanic until retirement. His new schedule may have restricted his movements, leaving less freedom to prowl at night. And as he aged into his 40s and 50s, overpowering victims may have become riskier. Still, some investigators doubt he truly stopped. They believe he may have continued offending in smaller ways, prowling, peeping, burglaries, crimes that didn't leave DNA or weren't connected back to him. There may be other sexual assaults or murders scattered across California that were never linked. For the public, it seemed as if the nightmare had ended in 1986. But for the detectives who kept the files open, there was always the same gnawing question. Did he really stop, or did he just change the way he hunted? In 2018, cold case detectives turned to a brand new tool, genetic genealogy. Instead of searching for the killer's DNA directly, they uploaded his crime scene profile into a public genealogy database. And there, they found distant relatives. Piece by piece, investigators built a family tree, tracing lines through generations until one name emerged. A man living quietly in a Sacramento suburb. A former police officer, a husband, a grandfather. Joseph James DeAngelo. Surveillance teams collected a piece of his trash, a tissue, and when the lab compared the DNA, it was a match. The Golden State Killer had been hiding in plain sight all along. On April 24, 2018, police surrounded his home. Neighbors watched in shock as the frail 72-year-old man was taken away in handcuffs. The monster who had terrorized California for decades was finally unmasked. In court, survivors and family members of victims filled the room. They faced the man who had stolen so much from them. One by one, they told their stories, the fear, the pain, the years of silence. And Joseph DeAngelo sat in his wheelchair, offering no words, only muttered apologies through clenched teeth. In 2020, he pleaded guilty to 13 murders and 13 kidnappings, admitting responsibility for dozens more assaults. The The judge sentenced him to life in prison without parole. He is alive today, serving that sentence behind bars in California. An old man who will die in a cell. His own family was stunned by the revelation. His ex-wife Sharon never spoke publicly, though she divorced him years before his arrest. His daughters, the children he raised in what seemed like an ordinary suburban home, were described as devastated, struggling to reconcile the father they knew with the monster unmasked in court. They did not attend the hearings. For them, the man who had once been their protector had become the face of evil. The question has haunted investigators, profilers, and survivors alike. Why? Why did this man spend years breaking into homes, assaulting women, and later murdering entire families? Some believe the seeds were planted in childhood. He grew up in a chaotic, abusive household. His father was violent and absent for long stretches. His mother remarried several times, creating constant instability. When he was around 9 or 10 years old, stationed overseas in Germany with his family, he reportedly witnessed his 7-year-old sister being sexually assaulted by servicemen. There is no evidence he tried to intervene. Whether frozen in fear or threatened into silence, the experience may have imprinted a twisted connection between sex, violence, and power that shaped his future crimes. Neighbors later recalled him torturing animals, a disturbing warning sign seen in many later violent offenders. By adolescence, he was already known for sudden, explosive anger and social isolation. The assaults he later committed were never about desire. They were about power. He controlled his victims completely, tying them up, whispering threats, humiliating them while their loved ones listened helplessly. The sexual assaults were his tool, but the real goal was domination. He wanted to prove he could invade the safest spaces, bedrooms, family homes, and bend people to his will. Psychologists believe his rage was aimed at women, couples, even the idea of intimacy itself. His law enforcement training, meant to enforce order, became another weapon. In his hands, control turned into cruelty. And when assaults no longer satisfied him, he escalated. Murder removed all risk of defiance. Death guaranteed submission. The psychology fits the profile of a sadistic predator. Control. The threats, the bindings, the taunting were about stripping away power from his victims. Humiliation. He forced partners to listen, made families feel helpless, and even lingered in homes to eat food or rest, savoring their fear. Escalation. Once assault stopped giving him the same rush, he turned to murder for greater dominance. Even in court decades later, he showed little remorse. His frail body and muttered apologies couldn't mask the truth. The Golden State Killer was driven by control, cruelty, and the thrill of holding life and death in his hands. For more than 40 years, he was the shadow in the night, the faceless terror of California. But in the end, it wasn't brute force or luck that unmasked him. It was science. DNA left behind decades earlier, resurrected through technology that didn't exist when he committed his crimes. The Golden State Killer believed he had escaped justice, but time and science had other plans. This is Decades in the Dark, where science brings the past to light. Subscribe for more stories where justice never expires.